about an industry which is really close to our hearts. And who better than Kurush, Dr. Kurush Dalal will speak about it. And it should help us understand this whole problem better, so that after everything starts fine, and if restaurants and vada pav walas are increasing their rates a bit, we will not complain, we will not give them गाली, देखो ये अभी फायदा उठा रहा है, कितना महंगा कर दिया. That is bound to happen, and we should be in a position to understand their pain, their problems. And when we have our vada pav, all our or our buffets at mainland China or whatever other restaurants, we should be able to appreciate what they have gone through. Dr. Kurush Dalal, please.
Thank you very much, Mugdha ma'am, for that. And thank you very much, everybody else who's been here today and who's come in here and been a part of this. So I was just talking to Mugdha ma'am about the entire situation and what was happening, and generally what my colleagues in the food and beverage business are going through. People that I know of, might not know personally, but know by reputation, know by name, various such people. All of these people are trying very hard to make ends meet. And there are waves upon waves of data that keep kind of flying between those of us who know each other. Almost every day we're hearing about some restaurant, some hotel, some food business, some catering establishment that is shutting down. There are horror stories. Now, I run a course called Studying Food, and one of the things that I keep saying in that is that food is one of the few voluntary things in our lives that we cannot do without. Breathing is involuntary. Sleeping is also involuntary. You can only tax your system to a certain point and you have to sleep. But eating and drinking are completely voluntary, and you can starve yourself to death. But even though it is such an intrinsic need of the human state, we do not study it in any way whatsoever. And we take the entire food business for granted. We take it for granted that all of those people who are making food, supplying food, giving food, producing food are just matter-of-factly there. They aren't really much of an industry worth talking about. And in a third world country like India, and yes, we are a third world country, there is no doubt about that whatsoever. We are not even going to be Shanghai. I don't know why we'd want to be anybody's Shanghai. In a city like Mumbai, there is an enormous unorganized sector that deals with food normally on a day-to-day basis. I'm going to start off by telling you my story before I talk about what is happening outside. I run a small artisanal catering business, or I should say I used to run a small artisanal business that does a lot of Parsi food. We specialize in Parsi dishes that very few people do, not just the few dishes that most people know about, but much larger repertoire. We do this very interesting cuisine, which is called continental and doesn't exist on the continent, but exists only in India. And we do all of this kind of food, and we do it for a select group of clients that we have. As a catering establishment, we do parties, weddings, this, that.
यहाँ पे ना लॉक मीटिंग के उस बाजू में जो टिक होना चाहिए ना वो नहीं है, और अभी रीगन आया अंदर, मैंने अभी उसको एडमिट किया.
Yogini, your mic is on.
Please switch off yourself. I have to do the meeting. Don't worry.
We can't because it's live on FB, and now people are joining in. I'll just tell them to try.
I have unlocked.
मुझे मालूम नहीं था कि लॉक कैसे करते हैं. I just went. हाँ. No. I think now people are joining in.
Please.
ग्रुप पे डाला है. रिद्धि भी आ गई. I think मैं
लॉक कैसे करते हैं. Mute yourself.
हाँ. Okay.
वो सुन ही नहीं रही है.
Everybody just stop calling.
कुछ
मीटिंग लॉक नहीं है, खुल गया. Okay. हाँ.
Who's that?
Somebody call up Yogini and tell her that she is also live along with me. It's okay, it happens. She's busy trying to do backend and her headphones are probably lying on the side while she's on the phone. So sorry about that, guys. But this is part of the lockdown world. And this is exactly what we have to deal with and with what we are dealing with. So I ran a small artisanal business, as I said, and we've been having a really, really hard time for the last 6 or 7 years. All over the food business has been going through a pretty bad phase. Lots of things have happened to us. GST happened to us, demonetization happened to us, all kinds of complications of the world, the market, so on and so forth, have all been hitting the food business. Everybody seems to think that, there's so much money to be made in food. People are making money hand over fist. Few people realize the overheads that any catering business has. The rules, the requirements, the laws, the taxes, the salaries, the equipment, so on and so forth. So very few businesses really have a take-home profit of more than 10 to 15%. And I mean, that's really pushing it at the end of the day after everything has been taken care of. So we've been managing, we've been getting along. Things have been bad, but things are bad. It's cyclical. We expect this thing. Finally, last year, all around in the food business was a good year. And everybody was looking up and everything was looking bright. And the end of the year really brought in things with a bang. Things were getting back to what we called normal in our line of business. And January, February, and even March looked really good. We heard about COVID and we heard about infected bats and we got the international news and it was worrying, but we got on with things. March is a very important month for people like me who are Parsis in the Parsi food business because we have a very important festival called Jamshedi Navroz, which falls on the 20th or the 21st of March. It was a weekend. We were packed with orders for Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. We executed the Friday orders, and on Saturday, we found out that there was going to be a lockdown from Sunday. So finally, having pulled the business back from the red into the black and having gotten rid of accumulated debt till the month of March, I was suddenly struck down on my busiest day by COVID. I took it in my stride and said, chalo, 10 days the government has said lockdown. It's a good thing. We need to do this. Let's lock down. Paid off the boys for the whole month, apologized to clients for bookings the next day, and shut down. It's been 5 months and 20 days since then. And there isn't any sign of the business coming back alive at all. 20 days ago, I took a call and decided that rent, electricity, and salaries, which I had been paying throughout this lockdown period with no income, had completely destroyed my reserves. And I was no longer in a position to keep going. So by the end of this month, we'll wrap up operations. I mean, there are no operations. We will just shut down with a whimper and we'll step back and we'll hope and see which way the wind blows. And maybe by December or January, if things are better, we'll try and stage a comeback. There is always a brighter future to look up to, so on and so forth. But I have other sources of income. I teach online. I run my own studying food courses online. I work with Live History India. And this means that I am not left stranded. My family is not left stranded. It is not like we do not have a roof above our heads, as is for many, many, many people in the F&B business. The reason that I did not shut down was because there were families of people who worked for me, who depended on me. But I've come to a point where I can no longer carry them along with me. I have as long as I can. And it's a horrible, horrible decision to make. It wasn't easy. In April itself, a young woman that I knew who started a very, very good patisserie business, shut down one of her main outlets and moved into a home delivery model. And a lot of people said, oh, why is she shutting down? What is the hurry? It's just about a month. She could easily have done it. She has very high profit margins. It's very easy to judge somebody else's profit margins without knowing the overheads that those people have. So this kind of a situation Those who shut down early might have been a bit ruthless in trimming their staff and so on and so forth, but they were perhaps more sensible than other people. More and more people that I know are shutting down their businesses every single day. I've been talking to people in the F&B business, and they're telling me that they're looking at a minimum 70% attrition, perhaps as high as 80%, if the lockdown does not ease by the end of September. And by lockdown does not ease, we are not saying being allowed to come to work and sending food out. A 100-seater restaurant cannot recover its basic cost, okay, by just sending food out, by making food deliveries. It is not possible. Not to mention that most people do not have reliable delivery systems and have to depend on delivery aggregators and specialists who all want a rather decent chunk of your money. You can't suddenly raise prices because your delivery is going to cost you more. And if your delivery is going to cost you more than your profit on the food per se, then why the hell are you running that business at all? So in a lot of cases, businesses are basically running just to keep their premises operational. And what does that mean? Mumbai, Pune, and Maharashtra are at the absolute epicenter of the COVID epidemic in India. Today, India is the #1 country. I regularly have people who send me messages on the University of WhatsApp and the University of Facebook telling me that UN has declared India #1 this, India #1 that, India's flag is the #1 flag of the world, India's anthem is the #1 anthem of the world. Well, by the way, guys, India is #1 in number of COVID positive cases, and this is the truth. And well, the Academy of WhatsApp is very quiet about it. The government is doing what it can do. The government is in a terrible situation, and just throwing up your hands and saying, what's the government doing, is not really good enough either. So let me tell you, for starters, the people who've been hit very deep in the pocket are perhaps those who had deep pockets, volume-wise. So the hotels, the 5-star hotels, have a massive staff. They need to have a very, very high occupancy rate of somewhere around 55 to 60% averaging throughout the year to break even. Now, internationally, 55 to 60, even 65% is considered fantastic. But hotels in Bombay have had 80 and 90% throughout the year rates of occupancy and have done very well. A number of our 5-star, 3-star, 2-star hotel chains and downwards all the way to dormitories are packed because Bombay is such an important urban hub. So the hotel industry, please understand, this is separate from the restaurant industry. The hotel industry sees thousands upon thousands of people coming into Mumbai every single day. And those thousands of people are coming for a day, 2 days, 10 days, a month, so on and so forth. All of them, almost all of them, have gone back. Only those who are living permanently here, who are expatriates, who are put up in hotels for a year or 2 years, sometimes by their companies, those are the only people left in the 5-star hotels. And they're not there by choice. They're there because they're not allowed to go home. Because international flights are not really operating, or because in some cases, they're critically important people who have to be here. Hotels have an enormous amount of staff because a certain amount of cleanliness is required from top down in the entire hotel chain. You very often do not see hotel staff. For those of you all who might have lived in a 5-star, 4-star, or 3-star property anywhere in India or the world, you would have no idea that there are often more people taking care of the hotel than are living in the hotel. So that is the kind of volume of staff in cleaning, cooking, maintaining, front office, security, swimming pool, gym, various different restaurants, kitchens, so on and so forth. All of this staff has to be paid salaries. regularly hotels pay lakhs of rupees as electricity bills. They pay lakhs of rupees in maintenance charges. And they pay many lakhs of rupees in salaries every single year. In fact, most of the top of the line hotels have salary bills that go into the crores every month. Now, imagine what has happened to them with their business coming to an almost complete stop for 5 months. 5 months of virtually zero occupancy and 100% overheads. So you'll say, they won't be using that much electricity. It doesn't work like that. You can't completely shut down the air conditioning in a fully air-conditioned property. Otherwise, you will see mildew and various other problems coming in. You have to keep doing pest control. And pest control agencies are not there. So you have to then do in-house pest control. You have to keep, well, your sheets off. You've got to keep your bathrooms, your taps, your electricity, so on and so forth maintained. You have to maintain all your kitchen equipment, and your security people cannot go away. So all those expenses are all in place in the hotel industry without any income whatsoever coming in. Imagine the plight of these things. But these are massive chains. Most 4, 5, and 3-star hotels have deep pockets because they have large organizations backing them. And in the case of international organizations, some of them actually even have epidemic insurance and things like that, I'm told. Though I have never heard of epidemic insurance before the pandemic that has happened here. What about the small hotels? What about the little hotels? What about Hotel Highway Star, which has 8 rooms? What does that hotel do? Nothing. They just seal everything down, lock everything up, and in a couple of months, lay off all their staff and have a couple of family members living in the hotel, keeping an eye on it. But even then, there are expenses. What about rents? So many properties, even large, important properties of 5-star hotels and such like, are rented properties. You can't turn around and say, I'm not going to pay rent. I've got no income. Arey bhai, the person that you're paying rent to, that rent is also the money that he, she, it is making, right? And they're not going to suddenly turn the tap off on you and say, tere ko dhanda nahi ho raha, don't worry, don't pay my rent. It doesn't work like that. The electricity department has been sending bills. After not sending bills for 3 months, they sent everybody such a massive bill in the 4th month that people went into withdrawal all over Bombay. Can you imagine what happens to a property that has that kind of electrical usage? What kind of bill goes to them suddenly? And this is on estimated monthly usage, which is from the good times. So you haven't even used that much electricity over 4 months, and you've got this consolidated bill, which you have to pay. So the courts finally came in and said, no, you cannot demand money or cut off electricity. People have to be given time to go back to this. Let's come to restaurants. We go out to restaurants to celebrate. We go out to restaurants to have fun. We go out to restaurants to hang out. A lot of people go out to low-end restaurants for their daily meals. I'll give you a simple example. My taxiwala, who I use very regularly to make my deliveries, and he's a guy I respect and trust, and I can send out my food with him without anybody in the cab, which means that I have less overheads, went to Gaon simply because he doesn't know how to cook. There's nobody around him to cook him and feed him. And the small restaurant in which he had his 3 meals a day has shut down. Look at the ramifications and the repercussions of restaurants shutting down. It's not just that you can't go out to have a burger. It's not that you can't just go out to celebrate or chill and have a coffee. And yes, those are important things too. But for a lot of people, it was not a luxury to eat out. It was downright necessary for them to eat out on a daily basis. All those people who were part of various different industries kept a large chunk of the restaurant business alive. Suddenly, the restaurants being forced to shut down, as per the law, I mean, and I'm not blaming the government in any way for this, okay? Being forced to shut down means automatically that all of these people have no place to eat. Horrible as it sounds, it's incredibly true. So restaurants shut down, but their rents continue, their electricity bills continue, and in cases where people have been working all their lives for you and have no other backup, and they spend 30 and 40 years of their lives working for you, you try your best to keep giving them salaries. 1 month, 2 months, 3 months, 4 months, 5 months. 6 months will break the back of any restaurant. When we are talking about 70% casualties, these are the casualties we are talking about. So think of all those little restaurants that we jokingly call Iranis and Chilia restaurants and so on and so forth. They're having an incredibly hard time wondering what they're going to do. Added to this, there are many establishments which are just catering kitchens. They don't have a place where you can come in, sit down and eat. Mine was a very small operation in that way. But there are large operations which have warehouses, godowns, vehicles, and which cater to thousands of people, 5,000 people here, 10,000 people. They're massive functions that they do. They have massive halls that they take on lease, and they take monopolies of these halls. And caterers pay annual monopolies to places so that they can use those kitchens which have kitchen licenses, and by default get all the parties that come to that marriage hall or to that venue. Now you paid upfront for the year and you're expecting a lot of business. May is the marriage season for Maharashtrians, April and May. Dead, right? Monsoons look like they're getting over. Marriage season is going to start once again from Diwali onwards. It's not looking good at all. So if you've paid for the year 2020, you are going to lose at least 9 months of possible revenue. Plus, you got all that equipment sitting there. When I went back to my kitchen after 2 months, there were 3 huge holes in the floor that the rats had made. They had gnawed at various bits of furniture and various storage bins, but we're a little ahead of the rats. So we have metal storage bins, and all our plastic barrels and things like that were on top of our metal storage bins. But we still had a mess to deal with. Just cleaning up the premises, fumigating the premises, rat-proofing them all over again, and all of that costs money. Now, if a small premise like mine, which consisted of 2 large rooms, one of which was my kitchen, the other was my pantry and office, if I had to go through so much, can you imagine what a restaurant has to go through? A restaurant that's been shut for 6 months has furniture, upholstery, walls, electricals, toilets, fittings. All of these need to be sanitized. In many cases, there has been leakage. You haven't had access to your premises. It means that you're looking at new furniture, new linen, very often new equipment. I've been speaking to restaurateurs all over India and listening to them on various lives on Instagram and Facebook and elsewhere. And one of the things that all of them are telling me is wires are chewed by rats. Equipment has been damaged. A lot of equipment has just shut down because of not being used. So a lot of freezing equipment, frying equipment, things like that, they're in trouble. My friend Antoine, who does a very interesting live, was speaking to a top restaurant owner from Bangalore who has 5 restaurants, which are about 100-seater restaurant each. And he is saying that he's looking at a 50 to 60 lakh rupee investment or reinvestment, if you want to call it, just so that he can get back on his feet. And that is if all the karigars are available. The plumbers, cleaners, sanitizers, fumigators, upholstery makers, carpenters are available. Where are they? They've gone home. They've walked home. They're coming back because they've got nothing at home to do either. But all of these people need to be in place for all of this to be done. Businesses which have been hemorrhaging funds for 5 months, even if they're allowed to open next month, what kind of condition are they going to be in? Are they going to be able to afford the kind of staff that they had? Are they going to have premises in place like they were before? Added to this, and this is one of the most horrible blows, is that as per the new laws put down by the government, you have to now have large spaces between restaurants. You have to have social distancing in restaurants between tables. You can't have cheek by jowl tables. Now, in a place like Bombay, where space is an absolute bloody premium, and you're basically, if I remember going to Pancham Puriwala and you couldn't get out of your table because the two tables around you, when you were in a corner table, were full, till they finished eating and moved, you couldn't get out of your table because you were jammed into place. In so many restaurants that I've eaten, you're sitting shoulder to shoulder with other people. Udupi restaurants, for example, right? What are they going to do? They all run on margins based on the kind of occupancy that they can have. If you halve their occupancy, you are technically halving their profits and their money's coming home. Not their profits really, but the money's coming in. And their overheads remain the same. So premises still cost the same. Electricity is still the same. Water is still the same. And then you're telling me, don't sack anybody, keep everybody. I want to keep everybody. So that price is the same. And you want me to serve food at the previous price. There is no profit. There is only loss. So I have to double my rates if I half the number of clients that I have. And nobody is going to come to me. If it's bad enough paying 30 rupees for a sada dosa, if I raise a sada dosa to 60 rupees in an Udupi restaurant, people won't come. If it's 120 rupee masala dosa in a sada Udupi restaurant, non-AC, nobody's going to come. Why will they come? They'll be like, are you crazy? So what are these places going to do? So many places have people who've in desperation gone back to Gaon, where people that I know have said, look guys, I can't afford to pay you wages any longer, but if things come back to normal, I'll take all of you all back. Those people have gone to Gaon because at least they're in the hope that do akki roti to milegi. We won't have to pay home rent. I've known so many people in the food business, young boys who work in the food business, who live 8 and 10 in a room. You think they have the guts to come back in these times under COVID and live 8 and 10 in a room in Bombay again? No, they don't. The human cost is already incredibly high and it's going to get higher. So that's restaurants. That's still organized. What about the thela wala on the street? If you've been to Xavier's to college and you'll remember the dosa wala outside, who then moved inside for a brief period. You'll remember the sandwich wala and the vada pav gadi, right? So you'll remember all these thela walas in these small hole-in-the-wall joints who are completely unorganized, getting off at the railway station and walking through a cow gully at Villepale, passing the guy who made the first Chinese bhel, getting off at the other station and pointing out to the place where the vada pav was invented. I had my first vada pav 3 days back. The vada pav lady has rented a room, a commercial premises, and she and her husband with masks and gloves are making and selling vada pav. And she's desperate, so she's trying to do this. She's hoping that in a couple of months, there will be enough business for her to be able to pay the rent. 10 rupee vada pavs are already 15 rupees. And she told me very, very honestly to my face, she said, Baba, this might become 20 rupees by next month. And then how will people come and eat? They will say 2 rupees ka pav hai, potato kitna jata hai andar, oil kitna jata hai. Will they understand how much rent I'm paying for each vada pav that I'm selling? How do you put rent cost to a vada pav? Can you factor in rent to a vada pav? Yeah, if you're a massive vada pav enterprise which is selling, your Bombay burger type of vada pav guys who are selling vada pav at 30, 40 and 50 rupees each, and they are a franchisee operation, they can afford to factor these things in. But the street side vada pav stall, the street side dosa wala, All those who've been to Bombay University, the dosa wala outside the gate. Okay, where is he going to go? And how is he going to wear a PPE suit and make masala dosa on the footpath and guarantee to you that social distancing is maintained around him? Your chai wala, your little bhat chai walas who operate out of the tiniest little kopchas between buildings and tiny little stalls with a primer stove on from 5 o'clock in the morning in Bhat Bazaar and various other crowded places, okay? Serving cups of tea every day and making really small margins, but making money on quantity, on selling 500 cups, 800 cups of tea every day. How is he going to manage to work with a mask and a PPE suit and gloves, maintain social distancing? He's not even allowed to restart his business at the moment. Have you thought how that thela wala, the vada pav wala, the dosa wala is taking care of his or her family? They don't have a boss who has made money and put money aside, or who has his own money after years of business to pay them a monthly salary. No, these people are basically daily wage earners. That is what you got to understand about the thela wala. Your vada pav wala is a daily wage earner. If he owns his own business, he's a daily wage earner. If not, it's even worse. He is working on a small commission or on a fixed rate from somebody else who has 3-4 stalls around him. Your bhilpuri wala, your chana singh wala, your chana chur wala, all of them, your jhalmuri wala in Bengal, all of them are daily wage earners. What they sell today is the money that they take home to stock up for tomorrow and to feed themselves. They are the people who buy oil on a daily basis. They are the people who buy vegetables on a daily basis, dal chawal on a daily basis. What has happened to their families in 5 months and 20 days? You really think that they have enough money stored by to keep them going and to come back and say, "Hey, no problem, I'll go start up again"? How are they going to do this? I'm asking you these questions because these are questions that our government has to think of. These are the people that they have to think of. And I'm sorry, guys, but these are things that drive me backs. I spent sleepless nights wondering, yeah, my favorite vada pav wala, my favorite limbu pani wala. So yeah, I like my food and you guys all know that. But I'm sure you all have your favorite vada pav wala. You all have your favorite ganna wala. What are they going to do? They have spent all this time without any wages whatsoever. Even if they had money saved up for a rainy day or money saved up for a wedding in the family or a daughter's wedding or jewelry or whatever, how is it going to last them? What are they going to do? So I've got 25 points and I'm about 5 points down just now. Think of all the market yards that supply food, which goes to all these restaurants. Think of the Mathadi Kamgar who unloads and loads tempos over there. Yes, they're part of the food business. Think of all those Mathadi Kamgars who work in Bhat Bazaar, loading and unloading rice and dal and masalas at Dana Bandar. Who's paying them? They're all daily wages. The union, the Mathadi Kamgar union can only take care of them for that long and give them that much. At some point, every union will break its backs when it doesn't get paid for 6 months. I've been paying my union dues for 25 years. You better give me a salary. It doesn't work like that. Union dues are a pittance. Mahina, 2 mahina ka strike hua, the union can take care of you. At 6 months, every union is ready to break its back. That's how union strikes are broken by big companies, by the way, if you didn't know that. So all those people who work in the market yards, who work around the market yards, the people who clean up around the market yards, the kachara wala, the persons who go through the B grade stuff and the C grade stuff and take it away, okay? The persons who buy damaged goods, clean them up and recycle them and upcycle them. All of those people who actually buy the gunny bags. There's a huge market in recycled gunny bags in which rice and dal come to big kirana stores, okay? And they're put into smaller bags and packaged into 1 kg bags and so on and so forth. What happens to those people? Do we think of them as part of the food business? We don't. I mean, wo gunny bag bechta hai here. Is that food? But yes, your food comes in those gunny bags. That is what offsets the price of your food. If you're wondering why your food is becoming more and more expensive, it's because all these offsets don't exist any longer. All those trucks bringing in goods, look at the quantum of food coming in. Okay? The quantum of food comes in through the roadways, through the trains. Trains were shut. Everything was coming in by road. Diesel prices have gone up. Petrol prices have gone up. I understand that the government needs to make money and that the government has no choice but to increase excise and things like that. But at this time, when our backs are already breaking, okay? And what does the guy in the shop tell the truckwala? We have an agreement for this year. Huh? You will give at this rate. Truckwala says, boss, have you seen the price of diesel? I've had no business in any case for 5 months. The shop says, neither have I, boss. If you don't want to give me at the rate that we fixed, I'll go to somebody else. What's going to happen? Vehicles that have been sitting in one place and lying in one place and rotting. I went back to Mazgaon to find school buses parked in a row where miscreants passing by have just thrown stones just like that. Masti, khujli. If those schools start again, they've got to repair all of those windows, which have just been broken out of frustration, perhaps. Not so much masti by people on the road. Fishermen. Fishermen were going out to sea and coming back with catches that were not being sold because markets were shut. They stopped going to sea. So then monsoon came. Abhi Naril Purnima ho gaya. They are trying to venture back to sea and set up small markets. The big clearing spots for fishing boats are non-operational due to COVID. So Bhaucha Dhakka, where most of the fishing for South Bombay comes, the fish for South Bombay comes in from the sea directly, is shut. So there's a bootleg market going on the PDMLO road outside, where people in desperation are selling fish. Because all those people who were involved in the fish business, people who unloaded boats, people who sold fish door to door, who bought fish and took it out to retail, wholesalers who wholesaled over there, people who had tekas over there, people who again did the cleaning of prawns so that the freezing companies could take those prawns into freeze, so on and so forth. There are so many little unorganized businesses. All of those, the people who carry out fish for you, who are called the party walas, they have this big basket and on their heads, they will take your fish out for you. They will walk behind you as you go from place to place, buying fish and handing it to it. The same guys in Crawford Market. I mean, it's a daily wage thing for the party wala, right? There's no market. There are no clients. It's easy for us to sit at home and say, "Arey, my Amazon pantry se order kar dega yaar." I mean, I'm not blaming Amazon pantry. Thank God for Amazon pantry, boss. Thank God for Meatigo sending me meat home, and so on and so forth. So many people. So one of my friends on Instagram, Tapke, who's from the Kohli community, has started a tempo where they're actually going from place to place in Bombay and taking fresh fish coming out from the Kohli waters and actually taking it door to door for delivery. So yes, there are people trying to do things. But for each one person trying to do this, it's virtually a drop in the ocean at the moment. Because there is no organization, there is no impetus, there is no help whatsoever coming, because nobody expected the pandemic that we have had. One of Bombay's greatest institutions is the Dabbawala. The Topiwala, as he was called when I was growing up. That beautiful Gandhi topi on his head, that cycle with dabbas, Gandhi topi on head, that big crate of boxes coming out of the station. Guys at the Mukadams at the station sorting and resorting trays, putting in trays into stations, station by station. You leave home, your food leaves after you. By the time you arrive in office, sometimes your food is already waiting there for you. Before you go back home, your dabba has already gone back and got home. 5,000 dabbawalas in Bombay, officially. That's the dabbawalas, the white topi walas. Not the private dabbawalas, because there's lots of little places that have their own operators who take dabba on cycle. I had a couple of boys taking them for me even till March. What happens to all of them? Each of them has a family. Average family size, guys, 4 to 5 people, 6 people, say. 2 parents, 1 on each side, husband, wife. Let's be completely brutal about this. A couple of kids, or if you're Indian, 2.8 kids. Every one of these dabbawalas is feeding 7 to 8 people. That's 40,000 people for 5,000 dabbawalas from the organized dabbawalas union. There must be at least that many dabbawalas again in this city. More than 1 lakh of people suddenly left without a monthly salary. 6 months and counting. The dabbawalas have never appealed before this. In 125 years, apart from the yearly holiday that they take, rain, sleet, snow, floods that dabbawalas have delivered and delivered without any complaint. They've been given a Forbes rating of 6 Sigma. For those of you who don't know, a 6 Sigma rating in any business abroad, okay, is something that is awesomely respected because that's the rate at which you make mistakes. It means 1 in a million times you make a mistake. Okay? These dabbawalas have that rate, that lower rate of making mistakes in their deliveries. And they're mostly not very highly educated people. They come from villages in the Konkan. They have families over there. They have parents over there. They have wives and children over there very often. Brothers, sisters, so on and so forth, whom they're educating. All of these extended families actually running ultimately into lakhs of people have all not had a salary for 5.5 months. The Dabbawala Union has finally opened up its joli and said, help us. The problem is, everybody is in the same boat. Who to help? How to help? Where to help from is the question that people are asking you. People are raising fundraisers to pay people in the hotel business. One of my friends, Karina, was part of a fundraiser to help bartenders who are out of jobs. So everybody is trying to do stuff. It's not like we're not trying to do stuff, but that's the way it is. All those people who were doing deliveries, home deliveries, the guy with the cycle with the dabba behind saying Suresh Restaurant, Ramesh Restaurant, Yahoo Allah Yalli Restaurant, okay, Anna's Kitchen, all those cycle wala boys. Where is their salary coming from? Swiggy, Scootsi, Zomato have picked up now in the last 2 months. But till then, all those riders, I asked the rider, are you getting even half of as much business as you did before? He says, no. I've been telling everybody who Swiggy's or Zomato's things to add that tip over there to the rider. Because those tips are really making a huge difference now. That's the way things are. And these are aggregator businesses, right? So this is the organized sector. Think about the unorganized sector and what's happening here. Chefs, cooks, line cooks, masala walas, this walas, that walas, all of those people who are in a kitchen, swabbers, cleaners, kacharawalas, bandiwalas, all of them are without jobs. Most restaurants are trying to pay half wages or part wages or something or the other. And then somebody catches COVID who's been coming to work for the last month and you got to shut down the entire premises because everybody's got to go on 15 days of quarantine. And your equipment. You know, the worst thing with equipment that is not used is it falls apart. I mean, it's very difficult to explain. If you have any refrigeration equipment which you don't use for a long time, it tends to die. Now, I don't understand what happens to it. Maybe I'm not the technical guy for this, but that is what happens. So people have been keeping fridges and freezers running if they can. I've got a 500-liter freezer that's running, and it's going to be running till the 15th when I shut it down. And it's got 4 bags of rock solid frozen mutton, which I will have to throw away, which is inside it. And I've kept it running just because if I shut it down, I don't know whether it will be in any position to be used ever again. So a lot of people are facing crisis of equipment that's shut down and nobody to repair it. You call up the freezer repair guys and you get a phone call that says, due to COVID, we are shut. My Samsung fridge at home has got a gasket leak, and every single Samsung in Navi Mumbai is shut. There are no service centers open. So can you imagine what is happening to people in the food business? If they can't get people to come in and repair things, can you imagine what happens if your cold chain gets compromised? It's a horrendous thing. So you pay more, you get whoever's available at whatever price is available, and you jury rig whatever you can together. You don't run 2 freezers, you run 1 freezer and you do the best that you can do. So all of this, equipments, mechanics, food chains, all the people who went and did buying, selling, providing for restaurants. So most restaurants don't have a guy who goes out and buys things for them. They have suppliers. Those suppliers are people who have links to the markets, who purchase from the markets directly. What has happened to all of them? Where are all of these people? What are they doing? Nothing, sitting at home. If you break down the number of people who are in an organized or unorganized sector in food, you will notice how far-reaching those repercussions are. You know, simple things. There are companies which do gourmet foods, lovely cheeses, imported hams. I have some very good friends who do this, and I must say I do like my imported ham and cheese. They've had stock which has been lying for, quite some time, and that stock is just sitting there 6 months in your fridge or in your freezer. You got to throw it away. Lakhs of rupees worth of imported food and an import license, and you're sitting at home and sucking your thumb. You might have, you might be very proud to say that I've got 2,000 kilos of ham in the fridge. You really can't eat 2,000 kilos of ham, can you? You can't even get to your ham because your ham is sitting in the godown, and you're hoping and praying that the freezer hasn't died, because otherwise it will have rotted in the freezer and then you have to throw the ham away with the freezer. Yeah. So just thinking that, oh, they make so much money, they send such expensive product. Expensive product has its own horrible other face. So the more expensive the product, the more damage to the company if that product has to be thrown away. Not to mention that if I have 6 months worth of product lying in my freezer, I could technically be raided by the BMC for having expired food in my freezers. But I can't get to my freezer, even if I want to throw it away. But the law is the law. Is anybody looking at this and saying these laws will be waived? These laws will be relaxed. We will expect people to police themselves. Nobody is saying anything. So, farmers and their families, farmers who are supplying, this whole thing about farm-to-table restaurants. What are those farmers suddenly doing? Because the tables that were eating their food are not eating them. The restaurants that are buying the product are not buying them. They are now left to the mercies of the common market, which they left. And which is saying, Abhi to apne dhande mein mat aa, boss. We are having a hard enough time. Are we even hearing about the farmer distress? My friend Varun Inamdar told me he was sitting in a government meeting where he was talking to various different people, and they were asking him a simple question in May. Should we sow our farms or not? Should we sow our grains or not? You tell us that. Is there going to be a market for them? And Varun saying, I can't say yes, I can't say no, I don't know what to say. And the government minister saying, you tell me, Varun, you are the expert that I've called in. What should I say? And Varun says, I don't know. People who are in the hiring business, So no caterer, normal caterer has 100 people, more than 100 people ka cutlery, crockery, chafing dishes with him or her. So you always go to a hirer, and depending on what your client's budget is and what your client wants and what your client's theme is, you buy, you rent cutlery, crockery, glasses, uh, napkins, tissues, chafing dishes, so on and so forth. Crores of rupees of those stuff is sitting in those godowns with those hirers and nobody to hire them. 5 months of having zero turnover means you cannot afford to pay wages. Think about it, guys. What is the cost to company? What is the cost to society? What is the cost to the nation? We are looking at higher and higher rates of petty crime because people are desperate to feed their families. Yeah, there are people taking advantage also. In UP, a group of guys in masks came in, used sanitizer, cleaned their hands in a jewelry shop, and then cleaned out the jewelry shop. I know, I'm only smiling about this because, I mean, if I was to cry for everybody, I'd probably have a complete nervous breakdown. So, rising debt. Those people who've taken loans to start restaurants. So there is a restaurant that was about to open on the 1st of April in Kharghar, where I had seen work going on for 6 months. He'd done up lovely interiors and everything, and he was just ready to open when COVID happened. He's rented the premises for a year. He's done up his entire premises. He probably hired staff and started paying them. And now he's running a tiny little delivery kitchen out of that place. The debt is killing him already. And he's praying every day that there is some miracle cure for COVID and everything gets back to normal. Everything is not going to get back to normal. Every single allied business is getting hit. Interestingly, home chefs are making a comeback. There is a light at the end of the tunnel. People are ordering more and more from home chefs who are cooking at home with their families, where people feel that the food is safe. Dunzo, VFast, etc. Very happy to send your parcels over from one place to the other, point to point. People are willing to pay for a change of food because they're sick and tired of cooking for themselves. So home chefs have made a huge comeback. I have a lot of friends of mine who've been part of the food world without really being business parts of the food world. But all of a sudden, they're starting their own little enterprises because the things that they did normally are not happening. I have a friend of mine who is an amazing travel blogger and used to have her own special curated tours to different parts of the world. Sitting at home, talking about various dishes that she makes, putting them on a blog. And somebody said, look, will you please make some for me and send me? And I was like, oh yeah, I'm also interested if you're making it. She was like, are you crazy? You're a caterer, you're in the food world. How could I feed you? And I said, I'd love to try something new. And she makes the most amazing basil chicken, which I've ordered twice already. So Roxanne, here's a shout out to you. She's called the Tiny Taster. So many people that I know, Shanti Petiwala who's out there, she's doing some beautiful pori food and sending it out to people, right? So many others. I could probably take 1.5 hours just naming people, food chefs who are out there sending food out. My wife Ria does the same thing with Bengali food, cooked in her kitchen, where she sends out food from Euphoria all over the city. Weekend menus are becoming incredibly popular amongst all these home chefs. And that is one ray of light in the food business. Okay? So, food classes. I've seen a rise in people coming to study food with me because A, they have the time because they're at home. B, they're working flexi hours. And C, they're interested and they can make these interests come true. So a lot of online learning has become possible. And a lot of people who could not learn otherwise and did not have the time have access to this. This again is something that the food industry is looking in at. Food shows, cooking classes. My friend Shreya Shetty from Mangalore runs amazing cooking classes now online. So do many others. My friend Kalyan Karmakar, who's a very well-known food blogger, is now running his own food consultancy to people who are trying to start up small startups at home and helping people out with what they should do, what they shouldn't do, what are the pros, what are the cons, so on and so forth. So people are helping each other out, people are reaching out to each other, and people are trying to create more online content so that this online content can be shared. So to paraphrase Aldous Huxley, it's a brave new world out there, isn't it? It's a very different world. It's very easy to say we are going to go back to normal. There is no going back to normal. And no, please don't tell me this is the new normal. This is not yet the new normal. We are still trying to figure out what we are doing, where we are stuck, what our position is, what kind of options we have. There is no normal that has been reached just now. This just is a stopgap arrangement at the moment. COVID is not going away. There is no magic pill. Okay? We can't all get together and bash our plates and make COVID go away. It's a time for rebonding with the family. It's a time for rediscovering how to cook. And people have been cooking more and more at home. Lots of people I know who are food professionals are now cooking at home and sharing with people and keeping their hand in their business and getting the jollies and the joys of sharing about food with other people. You know, it's not really Brave New World. It's more like Waiting for Godot. And for those of you who've read Waiting for Godot, Godot doesn't come. So don't wait for a magic bullet. There is no magic bullet out there. We have to find our own solutions. We have to talk to each other. We have to talk to businesses. We have to talk to the government. It's time to reinvent. It's time to start innovating in a serious way and looking at what is going to be the new normal. By the way, guys, there's collateral damage with the F&B industry. Tourism is dead. Travel and tourism is dead. I have good friends of mine like Asim Matangadi and others who have their own travel agencies who are just sitting at home. I used to consult with Yatra Online. From thousands of people that Yatra had in their staff, I think they have now 700 or 800 people. Because where are the airline bookings? Where are the homestay bookings? Where are the five-star hotel bookings? Nobody's traveling. What has happened to all the people who depended on this, who fed all these travelers? Think of all those people also. They're also part of the food business. Travel and tourism, ticketing, railways, taxis, bus drivers, they're all part and parcel of this world. So I'm not going to say that I have the answers. I'm looking for the answers just like everybody else is. And what I'm trying to tell all of you all guys out there is that this is the way of the world at the moment. And we have to seriously sit down, take stock of what we have, and look at plan B and plan C. Something I tell my students all the time. You can't just have plan A. Tourist guides are sitting at home for 6 months. They are paid per group of people that they take out. Where is their income? Where is the Vada Pav Wala's family income coming from? We're saying that, we are going to take all our education online. Kids are doing classes by smartphones. You think the Vada Pav Wala has a smartphone? You think he can afford a smartphone for his kids? He has 4 kids. You think he has 4 smartphones for them to go to school? Huh? You really think so? Take a cue from other governments, guys. DD2, DD3, DD4, start doing classrooms on those staggered or whatever. Because you're not going to reach out to rural people with smartphones. They can't afford those smartphones. Come with me to Dharavi, see families of 7 and 8 children. You think they have 7 and 8 smartphones to plug in? There's space for 7 or 8 children to sit in a line inside one of those little juggi chopadis and study? And put down notes or whatever, holding a smartphone in one hand, plugged in over here and taking class? While mummy is cooking, granny is sick, and dad is sitting on the doorstep and beating his head because he can't feed his family and they're starving around him and he's supposed to go and find a smartphone for his kids. These are all the people from the food industry and other industries. These are the backbone, the unorganized sector. You and me who are listening just now online are relatively lucky that we are still able to have internet and we are still able to have mobile phones and we are still able to have computers and homes and pay our bills. What about all those people in the unorganized sector? You know how many marriages have been cancelled this year? Weddings are just cancelled. People are sitting at home and marriages are breaking down because people are desperate, locked up at home with their own fears and nothing else. So there is no happy thing I'm going to say today. We have to take stock of what we have. We have to reinvent. We have to re-innovate if necessary. Godot's not coming. There is no brave new world. It's a harsh new reality. Until we can vaccinate the entire world, if we get a vaccine. It's not always possible to get a vaccine for every single virus. I was just talking to somebody from TIFR who told me this yesterday. People don't seem to understand that there is no one magic bullet vaccine. This is COVID-19. So obviously there's been COVID 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 onwards, right? So COVID-20 comes around, what are we going to do? Just lie down and die? No, we're not going to do, because we're human beings. Come on. We're fighters, right? We live where cockroaches can't live on this planet. And cockroaches are survivors for the last 333 million years. You know, so we live in niches they don't live in. We'll survive. We're tough. But we've got to sit back and realize that we need to pull up our socks, tighten our belts, get our acts together, and start looking out for people. If each one of us in a good place can help one other person, just one other person, we'll be doing a world of difference. And I know this sounds really corny and I sound like I'm doing prachar, but if you have an old smartphone which you're not using at home, clean it up, ask your watchman whether his kids need a phone. Ask people around you whether somebody's kid needs a phone and give them a phone. Every small act of kindness, pay it forward, guys. We are here because obviously we've had the luck to be here. On that note, I'm sorry, guys, but it's like the title of today's talk says, What Lagli? But we'll come through. We'll make do. We're tough. It won't be easy. It will be painful. We'll lose ones that we love on the way. We'll remember them in happier times. And we'll make the best of the times that we have with us. So on that note, thank you very, very much for listening to me and for coming here. And a big thank you to Instusen for giving me this platform to talk to all of you all and tell you all what is happening out here. And if there are any questions or comments, I think I'll look at the chat and I'll look at those. So thank you very much, Mugdha ma'am, Dhananjay, Riddhi, and Monish, and Ash, and Rishikesh, Anirudh, all the people in the back office, Yogini, who's now quite famous, everybody knows her name, thanks to her mic being on. All of you all guys, thank you very much for making this happen. Alan, for helping us out with our other back-end things. And all our partners who are there, all our students who are there behind us who are making this happen. And of course, the India Study Center Trust. So thank you so much, everybody, for this. Let's look at the questions. Chitra Acharya says, so many questions, how to find a solution, how to maintain mental peace, don't know how to pay installments of the things purchased. Remedy to all this is a big challenge and is horrendously heart-wrenching, Chitra. I completely understand. Chitra, by the way, guys, for those of you who don't know, is a tourist guide, is a very well-known, respected tourist guide in Bombay. And suddenly there is no income for the last 5.5 months. Nikhil Katyal says in another Insta Live where Dr. Dalal spoke, he talked about the audience through a lot of roadside eateries, local village stalls and small restaurants, highlighting the food items each one is good at. Yeah, what's happening to those people? What about the guys on the highways? What about the chai shop on the highway, the vada pav wala, Lavates at Vadkhal Naka, who I always talk about, Patil Khanawal at Murud? What are they all doing? It's a horrendous thought. Sukada Joshi says, we know that food industry is suffering a lot in pandemic, but people work in related areas also suffering. Yes. So it's not just the people who are dishing out food, Sukada. It's every single, so we are all connected. See, food connects all of us. Yes, ma'am?
Everything is collected. Everything is related.
Yeah. And, you know, we can't live without food. That's the basic human necessity. So if you talk about food as a metaphor, it is the metaphor that encompasses everything around you. You know, This is why I wanted to talk about this, because food really tells you the situation as it is. Chef Satyendra Jog is there. He says some food outlets who have good operating systems and dare to change their business model are surviving anyhow. Yeah, Satyendra, they are, and they're battening down the hatches. They're trying their best. They're reaching out. I've actually heard of Woodside Inn opening up a new outlet in the suburbs. And hats off to those guys. If they've put together the funds, opened up a new outlet, which is only delivery model just now, because they know that that is the model that is going to sustain them, this is the future to look at for other restaurants also. Don't look at the big restaurants that you had before. Look at small takeaway kitchens and go online with them. Yes, that is the model. It's a really scary scenario, Anirudh. I completely agree with you. I hope the situation gets over by January 21st also, but I'm looking at the whole of 2021 probably being more or less wiped out because people are going to be scared. People are going to be scared to be sitting next to each other. See, people are going out on the streets not because they want to, because they have to. People are piling into buses and all that because they have to. And there are idiots on the street who won't even wear a mask because probably they're just too fatalistic and have decided they might as well die. I don't know what it is, but yeah. New normal is very fictional, Chitra. I completely agree with you. 6 months, not a rupee. Yeah, I can understand completely where you're coming from. Saurabh Jasawala says, my mom runs a school for the lower income group and there is probably a 10% attendance online. This is exactly what I'm saying, guys. Because they just don't have the bandwidth to attend. Not to mention many of them have gone to Gaon because they had no other choice. Sleepless nights, Chitra, yes. Mahesh Kamble says many of the food-related issues could have been addressed if the government had implemented ICDs, midday meals, public distribution. Yes, 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 Mahesh. There are private organizations who've been giving out food packets. So my friend Monica has probably distributed some 50, 60,000 food packets to families. Rice, dal, oil, soap, things like that. And a lot of people have come out, reached into their pockets to do this kind of thing and to distribute food to people who are in desperate states. But the government machinery, poor thing, has never imagined a catastrophe at this level. So our disaster management, poor thing, has never thought of a disaster of this proportion. And yes, it's, again, it's easy to say implement. Actually implementing it on the ground is a different thing. Setting up a soup kitchen at Azad Maidan and telling people to come and eat there has all the ramifications of getting your food there, getting people to cook it there, getting people to serve it there, and then expecting people to come and eat there. And then there will be all the usual joel about, अरे मेरा 10% commission नहीं आया, मेरा 5% commission नहीं आया, and so on and so forth. And all these times also the same old things exist.
Somebody on FB asked me a question, why are you talking only about food industry? We are talking about the food chain, really. It connects with everything.
This is what I'm saying. I'm using food as a metaphor here, guys. For the guy who works in a cobbler shop also, he has to eat. For the man who works in a factory also, he has to eat. For the guy who goes every day and puts on a headset at 9 o'clock in the night so that he's available in America and says, hi, this is Sam. He has to eat. And he goes out to the same places to eat that I'm talking about. He is not earning. The food places are not open. Nobody is making money. The government says that the GDP has taken a 24% hit. People I know in economics are telling me that it's probably a 42% hit by the end of July. And we haven't yet counted August. There's half a year left. If GDP takes a 60% hit, we are looking at economic meltdown, guys. And this is a global phenomenon. And there are waves of COVID happening again and again and again. So all industries, your farmer, your gardener, your painter, your carpenter, everybody has to eat. Food is the metaphor. And food is what this talk is about. That's why I'm talking about food. So yes, Anita, very much we need to sit down and talk about what regulatory changes are required. The government needs to say that the loans will be held in abeyance. and that it will help companies and help banks. It will help lending institutions. It will allow you to extend small loans to people that we now desperately need a social security net, which we've never had in this country. We need farmer insurance. We keep talking about the farmers. Every bloody election, every political party talks about the farmers. Why the hell don't we have farm insurance? Why are they killing themselves and drinking poison over there? Those are the guys who are feeding us, remember? And they're using the same pesticides that save the crops so that we can eat them to kill themselves. Because then their death will end with them.
Kurush, what do you think? Your lobby, I mean, the restaurant lobby or any lobbies, are they trying anything to get those 3,000 crores of rupees as a part of bailout, or do you think it is indeed a bluff?
See, ma'am, I don't know whether it's a bluff or not, but I know that the National Hotels Association of India, etc., have all sent various petitions to the government. But what they have been very quietly told is, you're not a government agency. You're a private agency. Thank you for your views. We find your comments very interesting. We'll take them under advisement.
And there's
but what does the government do? It's so easy to say, government should start this machine printing money and everybody can line up and take 20,000 rupees and go out. Not really happening. Not to mention that in Maharashtra, at least, we have a chief minister who's regularly on the air telling us what the situation is, for which I have the utmost respect for him. The same doesn't really seem to be happening at the center, which means that the problem is that much larger on a national level.
At least on some level, bailouts are necessary.
Yes, we need petitions, Anita, but petitions also, like I'm keeping on saying, the government is kind of looking around like this. Idhar ek band-aid lagaya, udhar ek chikkat patti lagaya, idhar thoda chingam laba diya, and you're out to the next fire. I don't see cycles like this balancing millions for quite some time. But yes, there have been exorbitant rentals. See, the exorbitant rentals also have to do with things like the Rent Control Act. So the Rent Control Act needs to go, but then you'll say, "Arey yaar, I was paying 125 rupees rent. Now I'll be paying 15,000 rupees rent. मैं कहाँ से लाऊंगा?" That is the reality. So socialism hasn't really helped us very much. It hasn't really regulated anything. The kind of socialism we've had at least. So I see really serious lessons to be learned from this COVID. This is not really such a bad pandemic. The death rate is less than 5%. I know that sounds horrendous to say something like this, but imagine if something really virulent hit us with a 20% death rate. Okay? Which is very possible. Our population has gone completely unchecked. And no government who enforces population controls in a democracy can expect to get re-elected. We already know this. Right? It is our God-given right to breed like whatever animals we want to breed like. I think we should just say breed like humans. Population is a very, very big factor. The reason why there are pandemics in China which spread so fast is China's massive population. The reason why we are number one is our massive population. The fact that more people live in the unorganized sector than live in the organized sector, even where living is concerned. I mean, Dharavi and Devnar and Vikhroli, the massive slum townships that exist, are places where it's impossible to control these pandemics. The BMC is trying everything that they can have. They're throwing everything, including the bloody towel and the basin at the problem, and the bathwater. Ishan Sadvelkar says, I know people who shoot food photos, videos, and weddings as this source of income. Both industries are shut down and they can't even go back to their hometown sometimes. Yes. Go back to your hometown and do what? You've left everything there, Ishan, and come here. You might have a house in Gaon, but what are you going to do with that house in Gaon? You don't have food at home. You don't know how to till crops. You don't know how to farm. Farming is lost in a single generation, the ability to farm. I will, Anita. Regan Criado says, do you think that being in Mumbai, we are in a declining economy, whereas most smaller towns will be growing an economic growth? Yes. To some extent, yes. See, the other problem is everybody comes to Mumbai because the streets are paved with gold. No? How many are Mumbaikars who've been here for even 2 generations? So Mumbai attracts people because there is opportunity here. And yeah, everything being together is an opportunity. So Regan, I don't know how far, but in the short term at least, the Mufussil towns are looking far healthier COVID-wise, as long as there is no great movement of people in the country. Once people start moving in the country again, all bets are off. Sugata says, my sister's feeding 200 blind old beggars who used to beg in trains. Those are the people who are completely dependent on help. Sugata, your sister's doing a lovely job. Please say thank you to her from all of us. Yes, the situation is horrible. There was a farmer protest, Lati Shah.
But I would say that we need to help more productive people.
Yes. So those of us who can help need to find out who it is who's making a difference and help them make a bigger difference. This is only a time to do charity. I'm sorry, I have no other great solution to give people. Yeah, the farmer protest was Lati Charge. Why do you think the farmers are protesting? As it is, we underpay our farmers. We have a very, 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 very horrible situation where farmers are paid less than 10% of what the end consumer buys the product for. Metro cities and urban areas, says Prashant Sejwalkar, more people are involved as food servers and consumers compared to rural areas. Yes. Prasad, this is one of my great lines, that everybody who lives in a city is a parasite. We do not grow our own food. We have other people growing it for us. We buy it from them. Yeah, Anirudh, the Black Death. So those of you all who would like to learn what would have happened if the Black Death had got slightly out of hand, there's a beautiful book called My Years of Rice and Salt. One should read that as an alternative history of what happened to Europe if the Black Death got slightly out of hand. Farmers are protesting in absence of any minimum support price clause. Do you know that there is no minimum support price for potatoes ever? Potatoes are the number 5 staple in the world, but there has never been a minimum support price for them because they are a vegetable. 11% suicide rates. And Sampurna Das, 11% are what we know. What about what we don't know? So Anita, yes, there are many people like this in Bandra and elsewhere in Bombay who are distributing food on a daily basis. Kranti India has been providing food to homeless people since the start of the lockdown, yes. So there is MSP for millets in some places now. I know Karnataka has it. I don't know if Maharashtra has it or not. Very good question, and you should look into it. But Karnataka has been working very hard with millet farmers. But then they have a larger consumption of ragi over there. Usually minimum support prices for rice, wheat and corn. Barley is no longer really a crop worth talking about. And there is sometimes minimum support prices for pulses. I may be completely wrong, so please don't quote me on this. And if anybody knows better, please punch it in or any of that. So, I really think this is a time to do charity if each one helps one. If each family who's in a situation that is safe helps a family that is not in a good situation, okay, that itself will make a huge difference to a city like that. And if you can spare a little money for people who are running khichdi and dal chawal and whatever for poor people who are... See, it's very difficult to go for a handout. Guys, you've got to realize this, It's about self-respect. And then to go and get free food every day from somebody who says, "Arey, kaisa hai? Didn't see you yesterday." And you realize that you've been going every day. And your self-respect goes down that one more notch. And not because that other person is trying to beat your self-respect down. Because you want to be able to feed yourself and your family. That's a very basic need, right? That we all have. So I think I've done enough doom and gloom for the day. There is a way out. And we are groping in the dark, but we'll find the way out. You have to be positive at the end of the day. You can't be like, "Oh God, I'm going to lie back and this is it." No. Don't wait for the truck to roll over you. Those trucks aren't running on the roads anymore. Okay? Get up. Pull up your socks. If you're not wearing socks, pull up your shorts or whatever you're wearing, and get to doing stuff. And like I said, help people out. And think of what would happen if you were in their places and nobody helped you. Each one help one. It's like each one teach one. That kind of thing.
There should definitely be some initiatives to start helping productive people. Not just charity, but a focused charity. Like there was a person from Nashik tribal belt. They lost all their seeds, and they wanted help to buy new seeds and buy some tools. And we raised a voice and we collected some money for that. So definitely, such small initiatives should be taken up by.
But we need a Grameen Bank setup, no, ma'am. We need a Grameen Bank kind of setup where we can give small loans. No. What I'm saying is, in the present scenario, we need to be able to disburse small loans to people and say, look, let your crop come in, pay for the seeds at that point. If you can. If you can't, next year. So we have to be able to extend this credit to the farmers. Ma'am, if the farmers don't farm, we people in the cities will die of starvation. Please, guys, remember this. Ultimately, if the farmers don't starve, we are buggered. Okay? All of us who live in the city are parasites. There is no food for us if farmers don't farm. If farmers start farming only for themselves, that will be a real crisis.
Let's all think about what initiatives we can undertake to help others. To help
very happy with trust. I know I'm speaking for Mugdha ma'am and Dhananjay sir. Our email ID, just share the email ID in the chat, please, Riddhi. So our email ID is there. If you think of constructive things that can be done, please mail us. And if you want to create a group, talk to us about it, and we'll try and create a group which can reach out to help people, or at least put a broadcast list of people who are helping people and things like that. We have a very simple email ID. It's instucentrust@gmail.com. That's INSTUCEN, Instucen Trust. That's the India Study Center Trust. Okay, INSTUCEN Trust@gmail.com. Do write to us. We'll be happy to hear from you. And if there's some way in which we can help you back.
Sampurna, we have to go beyond this soft charity, having langars and distributing food packets. We really need to go beyond this kind of charity. If the government is lagging behind, not being able to work for whatever reasons, maybe there should be people's initiatives to do something about it. Not just food packets, something beyond that.
Let's food packets is a stopgap measure, ma'am. Food packets is not a solution.
Yes, it's not.
A solution has to be much, much bigger than that. It has to be on a policy level. And then we got to be strong enough to make those decisions. And they won't be nice decisions, because the government also ultimately only makes money from taxes. The government can't just print money. So the government has to think very creatively of job creation. Every time we've had floods in this country, we've talked about Manrega and things like that. Why are we not talking about a Manrega-like scheme in this situation? Give people self-respect and let them earn money for their own food. Let them earn their meals, give them self-respect. We'll have to retrain a lot of people at this rate.
At some point there would be a situation where we will have to create self-respect. That shouldn't happen.
That shouldn't happen.
Okay, Kurush, that was really touching, and I hope it has made everybody think about not just food industry, but everything that radiates from it. Thank you, Kurush.
Thank you very much, ma'am.